morning, everyone. And I was going to say, I don't want to blow all your ears out, so I got to adjust where this needs to be at. But thanks again for coming out with our coffee with the senator this morning. Hopefully everyone has their power back on. I know some people just got their power here the other day and survived our blizzard, so hopefully now it'll feel like spring as we move on. But we do appreciate you coming out this morning to hear from Senator Lonowski about what's going on with the legislature, bills, just some housekeeping notes. He'll talk about, well, probably 15 minutes, just giving a rundown about what is happening down there in Lincoln, bills that he's working on, certain bills of interest to him. Then we'll do about 15 minutes just on going over maybe talking about the budget, where that's at, and maybe some other questions that are of interest in Adams County Farm Bureau and the Hastings Area Chamber. Just a reminder, this is sponsored by the Hastings Area Chamber and Adams Webster County Farm Bureau. So I'm Lance Atwater. I serve on the Nebraska State Board of Directors for the organization and have been able to do this coffee. Many of you are familiar faces, but have done this coffee for, I don't know, it's probably been almost 9 years. So I've always enjoyed this, so I hope you enjoy getting to interact with our senator. And then once we kind of get through about 9:30 or so, if you have questions, we ask that you please just raise your hand. We have staff that will bring a note card to you, write it down. It's just easier, I can read it into the mic, and so that way everyone knows what that question is. And then we'll allow Senator Lonowski to answer it. So again, if you have a question or something that you want to ask the senator, please, there's Mickey in the back. She has yellow note cards. Just raise your hand and write it down and then give it to him, and we'll move on. So with that, Senator Lonowski, I'll hand it over to you, and you can kind of give us a rundown on all the good things you're doing.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I know you don't believe this, but senators have troubles with their vehicles too. And so, thankfully, I kept my old pickup from when my daughter didn't want to drive it to college anymore. And so I could get into that and come. The old ones are better. So, as you might have heard, first of all, hopefully everybody got a sheet. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, so you can pick through that and ask questions about it. But as you might have heard yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order cutting the Department of Education. There are some people that are fretting to death and afraid that that means the end of public education in the United States. And there are people that think, finally, this is what we needed to have happen. So if I've talked to some people at Department of Education and people at the NSEA and other things, they all have a different view of this. Here's what I can tell you from my thought. That's $34 billion of tax money that's going to different places. So I did a rough little math of the number of students that we have, and I did not include college, but K-12 in Nebraska versus the number of students across the United States. And that means that our share of that should be about $380 million. Right, we'll see it. But anyway, if that's the way that works, I can tell you Department of Education has helped a lot of kids go to college for free. They've helped special education throughout the country. But I also believe that it's a department we can do without. I do think that education left at the local level, in this case at the Nebraska level and lower, I truly believe we can do a lot better for ourselves than a bunch of bureaucrats in DC. I'm on the Department of Education, so I will probably have a big hand in how that shapes up in our state. Now with that, Governor Pillen has asked that we shape or reshape TIOSA. TIOSA is the funding method that it's got a bunch of complications, but basically it's your needs versus your ability to raise money, and it goes into a formula, and then schools receive state funding through that. So we're trying to reshape that, and now with with the Department of Education perhaps going away, it will be real interesting to see how we shape education. If you look on this bill sheet, unfortunately, one of the things we've been wasting a lot of time, and I do mean wasting, is daylight savings time. Now, most people seem like they just want to quit changing their clocks. They don't care which way we go or the other. As I think of it, I like that extra light in the summer. I think it's valuable for kids to be able to stay outside with it's light as much as possible. The golf leagues around Lincoln have weighed in on it, and they say they will lose millions of dollars if they don't have that extra hour of light. But I don't know, that doesn't affect my world a whole lot. But I also think in the winter that I don't want people driving to work at 8:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning and it's still dark out. So I kind of jokingly mentioned that we should just split the half-hour difference, and some countries have done that, and be done with it. As that started to pick up steam, now there's 3 or 4 senators that, that's not a bad idea. And so, that's right, we'll try to make everybody happy, and that would really kind of cure perhaps that concern of getting dark too early in the summer or not getting light early enough in the winter. And there's literally a nonprofit organization, the guy's name is JPPEA, and he has his own website on standard savings time or standard time and how much that benefits our health and everything else. So I'm not going to waste any more time on that, but it's been an argument. I've chosen as my priority bill require a health care facility to dispose of the remains of aborted unborn children. And what happens in a lot of facilities, we don't know what's happening in Nebraska, but in many facilities around the country, when children are aborted, they're put into thick trash bags and they're thrown away like garbage. This is Senator Hansen's bill. It is personal to me. I do think that's not the appropriate way to treat any unborn baby, but it also, there's a health hazard with that. And so it's kind of a twofold win if we can make that happen. As you know, I had a vaping bill. I've just seen so many kids that are vaping, and then I see all these flavors like Tutti Frutti and Cinnamon Toast Crunch and wild watermelon, and I don't think that's what the 30-year-olds are vaping. And so I tried to get rid of several flavors, like 6,000 flavors, all except for tobacco and menthol. But the committee that voted, they believed I was infringing on the rights of too many adults. And so it got voted down, I think 5-3 in committee, and so we're moving on. So I chose a different priority, and Senator Hansen, he's from the Blair area, he asked me if I'd like to carry this bill, and I said, yes, I would. So other things that are happening, we have this brand bill, and it's basically, should we still brand our cattle? Well, the ranchers believe their cattle are still getting stolen out there, but this bill only applies to half of the state. And so the cattlemen who have feedlots, they believe their cows and calves are safe and they don't need a requirement to brand their cattle. But the ranchers, most of them out west still believe in this, but it's a costly venture, and so I'm trying to look into more into that and trying to figure out how to vote. The eastern half of the state doesn't require it at all, and the western half of the state does, and we live right on that line where the ranchers do or don't. And so it's kind of a conundrum right now for us, and it's kind of the last thing I know about branding is when I had to try and hold the rope on the cow's neck when I was a little boy, and Dad was putting a hot iron to the butt of a cow, but otherwise, actually butt of a calf, but otherwise I don't really remember a whole lot about the significance of that. Any other bills? What I really want to do is let you ask me a question. So any other bills that we're talking about? Cybersecurity is huge. Maybe about a month ago, Power School, and Power School is probably what 90% of schools use now in Nebraska to maintain grades online, both public and private schools. And so all the grades they're coded and encoded and decoded and everything else, so they're supposed to be secure. But hundreds of thousands of Power Schools were hacked, and that means the parents' information, the kids' information, and some different areas that we don't want people to have. Unfortunately, it's very expensive to try and keep your systems secure. And so as we were looking at a $400 million debt this year, and now we're still, I think we're down to $250 million that we're still trying to figure out where we're going to find the money. Cybersecurity is an expensive venture. With that, I'm going to turn it over to questions so that we can keep rolling.
Yeah, so real quick, kind of before we open it up to audience again, if you have a question, just raise your hand, give that, write it down on the note card, so then we can ask it. But why don't, Dan, I have a few for you, just from probably some that maybe might not be in the news every day, that everyone's not aware of it. It is on this list down here, is there are a few bills that deal with sales tax exemptions, such as Senator Brandt has taxing pops, soda. Senator Merman, I believe he also has some sales tax exemptions. So could you just maybe tell the audience, especially as we're talking about a budget shortfall, and then one thing that probably is not getting as much attention this year is property taxes, because of the budget shortfall. Obviously there's not the money there, but there still is things being worked on to try to figure out how do we fund not only education, but state government. So could you just maybe share with us where you stand on some of these sales tax exemption bills that are prioritized?
Sure, thank you, Lance. I think it first came up with cigarette sales tax, and the fact that we haven't added a sales tax to our cigarettes in several years. And so the person working on that looked at Iowa and said Iowa's taxing their cigarettes, I don't know, like $1.30 a pack or something. And so we were going to try to raise that. Well, then the issue came up, well, why aren't we taxing all tobacco products? Why aren't we taxing alcohol? And then it kind of came to, well, candy's not good for you either. Why don't we tax candy bars? And so I'm like, okay, if we can maybe keep like Busch Light off of that list and keep Snickers bars off of that list, I will be happy. But in all honesty, we have not added a tax to those in a long time. A lot of people refer to that as sin tax because it's maybe like our little pleasures, a Snickers bar here and there. And it seems like those items are rising up in cost without being taxed, but there's also the taxes there. I'm really a big opponent of vaping and all this new stuff, all these new products that have come since about 2015. Senator Hughes from Seward she's added like a 40% tax to vaping. And there's also these new it's a new product, maybe a year or two it came out, called Zyn, Z-Y-N. So it's sort of like a tobacco product, but it's the vaping stuff that's inside of it. So people can put it between their cheek and gum like a packet, but it's still it's still addictive because of the nicotine, and it's still a cancer-causing agent. All of these products, I think, the statistics show that the more you tax it, the more people quit doing it. So the people taxing it, their idea is we can get some people to stop, and at the same time we can kind of raise some revenue through some of those items. So I'm not sure where I stand on all that, to be honest, because it just seems like we're taxing people for some of the small things in life. However, there's millions of dollars of revenue to be raised through some of that. And if some of you remember, the cigarette and smoking taxes way back in the 70s were used specifically to build the Bob Devaney Sports Center. And so if we can if we can see the results and see the advantages of that, I'm all for it, but sometimes it seems like we tax things and then by the time it gets to the local level, we haven't benefited one iota from it. So as long as we can kind of keep our tax returns at the lower level, at the local level, I'm all for that.
Another bill that is prioritized is Jana Hughes. She has LB 303, which basically is trying to, it's a longer term approach to fixing how we fund K through 12 education by providing more foundation aid for students, but also lowering the levy over time. So where do you stand on, that issue? Obviously it could change, it could get amended, but especially as we look at trying to solve how we fund K through 12 education.
Yeah, so most of you probably realize this, but well over 60% of our local taxes go to public education. So we do have a right to say, what's going on here, how do we spend it? But the formula is called TEOSA, and that is Tax Equity and Educational Opportunity Support Act. So basically, this is, it's how we figure out our taxes for schools, which we mentioned earlier. And you can look and see, it's all public record. Adams Central does not receive money through TEOSA because A, they don't have the same poverty level as perhaps Hastings High, but B, they have a lot of property tax that comes in. So Hastings High relies heavily upon TEOSA, free and reduced lunch, and Adams Central doesn't need to so much. And so that's just kind of the nature of the beast, but the governor has asked us to look to rework this TEOSA formula, and that's what Senator Hughes has prioritized, that Lance was talking about, for LB 303, and it's just a little bit of a difference on how to apply taxes. What we're really trying to do is keep property taxes level and not raise them up, and at the same time find ways to fund public education.
Another one, Senator Lonowski, it's Brandt. He has LB 317, which is a merger between the Department of Natural Resources with the Department of Environment and Energy to form the Department of Water, Energy, and Environment. And basically this has been with the budget shortfall this year, that obviously Governor Pillen's continuing to look at ways to trim government, trim state government. What is your view on merging state agencies together, such as this one?
I believe, Lance, that what they've decided to do is have a brand new committee that's nothing but communications, that will include internet and phone service and Allo and all these different companies. And so in order to kind of make space for that extra committee, they're merging a few committees, just because there's not enough days in the week for the 49 senators to be on different committees. And so in order to make time for that, they've merged them.
Well, and this one's actually the departments, so it'd be like Department of Agriculture.
I'm sorry, got you. I guess that's more like, rather than having two umbrellas, you're kind of putting everything under one larger umbrella. And it's kind of how I looked at Department of Education as well. Some of the responsibilities that they have, they go away and go under another umbrella, if you will. I'm not really up on that one a whole lot, so I don't want to say anything that will.
And then the last one, obviously most people are probably familiar with the Perkins Canal, the issue with the water with Colorado and Nebraska, and they're wanting to build the canal, which was passed, I think, back in I think it was prior to COVID. Senator Raybould, she's wanting to take that $500 million and put it into, basically use it either to help fund state government. Do you have any insights on some of these issues? Because these are going to be issues coming forward that you'll have to vote on.
I have my own opinion and my vote, Lance. She had better not touch the money that's set aside for Perkins Dam project. And so here's what happens. we get water runoff from Colorado, and Nick is here, Nick, so if I say anything incorrect, please stop me. But along that water that's flowing from Colorado into Nebraska, people are building, just like Johnson Lake, all these houses came up. Now that's happening in Colorado along there, and so they have water to use. So the way we can garner our water runoff is to build the Perkins Dam project and make sure that we store water enough for our irrigation projects that come through the southern, well, through a lot of Nebraska. And that's kind of what I know about that. I'm pretty sure that Senator Rabel's idea won't fly. Can you help me out on that? What else, Nick?
Yeah, our intel says that bill's not coming out of committee. It was gonna benefit Lincoln water projects, but basically the background of this canal is we're entitled to this water from Colorado, but we don't get it unless we build a system, a canal system to deliver it and a reservoir to store it. And this goes back to the 1920s, an act of Congress, not unlike the Republican River Compact. So right now we're not actually getting this water. Colorado's going to be using, as you said, developmental. If we want the water, we're going to have to move forward with the canal project and build a reservoir to have that water delivered.
Can you help me with some dates on the project, like when we'll actually start building, or is that not even?
So we actually just had a meeting with this. So yeah, to Nick's point, for those of you that are not familiar with it, I mean, it was in a lot of publication kind of when this was talking, because there's concerns about the money. It's a $500 million project, but to Nick's point, you know, there is concerns with Lincoln and Omaha down the road, because they get the majority of their water from the Platte River. So if their source of water dries up, they're going to have to figure out where they're going to get their water at, which means they may have to pipe it in from Missouri River, and so the additional costs down the road. And the concern, like Senator Lonowski and Nick said, the concern is there's a lot, if you've been to Colorado, you've probably seen a lot of homes be built in the Front Range. And with all those homes takes a lot of water usage. And so there's concerns that there is nothing to hold Colorado accountable for the flows of water that they should be sending down the Platte River. And so I know they've been, last report I got, they've already have acquired some land in Colorado, because basically the state has had to use eminent domain or go into Colorado to purchase land, because this, the Perkins Canal actually will start in Colorado. So the state has already had to purchase land in Colorado to start building this. And then the last I heard yesterday is that they're assuming this project could get done sooner than what it was, and possibly maybe by 2030 this could all be done. So I know when you go out that way, there's some concerns with landowners out there, because obviously it's going to take farmland to build this. But there was also concern that, you know, if Senator Rabel's bill went through and she's able to take this money out, it could really impact the future of, even though she said she supported it, but just didn't want to use the money right now. So I don't know how you do that. But, so that's where that's at. So those are a few issues. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our audience questions. The first one we have, with the closing of the Department of Education and lowering property taxes, where are local school districts going to get their money?
That's a great question. Okay, and I spoke on that a little bit. As you know, I was a teacher for 35 years. I felt like the federal Department of Education never contributed to my betterment of teaching or change of the way I taught or anything. Pretty much, we set our standards at the state level, and now we do base that on guidance from the federal level, but we also had enough leeway that we could change what they were doing. And I'll give you some examples. Way back when I became a teacher in 1989, they just came out with this rule that said you have to take a cultural studies class. You've got to learn about other cultures. I would say pretty much every teacher in their area probably knew enough about cultures that they would get it through. So what we had to do is we had to prove on a piece of paper that we talked about culture 3 different times throughout the year. So that's easy when I'm a Spanish teacher, right? But the welding teacher, did he really have to explain welding in Africa, or did he have to, explain shop class of how it's done in India? I don't know. It was a little bit harder for those teachers to come up with things. And there was no money tied to it, so it's called an unfunded mandate. In that case, it didn't cost money, and so it wasn't a big deal. But there are some textbooks nationwide that say, look, this is the textbook you need, or at least this series, because it includes these cultural studies and it includes this. And for the most part, Nebraska has been able to say, we're doing this for our studies. Now, one of the problems with Department of Education on the federal level is they tie it to money. And so if you don't do this, this standard or what have you, then we're going to limit your money that you receive for free and reduced lunch, or you're going to receive this. So I really believe education at the state level for Nebraska is the correct answer. And I think then we will have people serving on there that are from Hastings, Nebraska, or Axtell, Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, not a bunch of people up in DC that we will never ever meet, or maybe never ever align with on a lot of different issues.
You can answer it. Where's the money coming from?
Well, so the Department of Education is $34 billion. So we're already receiving a lot of that. So that money, if it dissolves it back into the states, it comes from that. But we're already paying for our own education here, right? So one of the issues with Department of Education is they help a lot with special education issues and some of those mandates. But a lot of times, the money tied to it is we're matching it anyway, just to make sure that our feet are held to the fire. And so where it comes from exactly, it's hard to say, but it will be at the local level. A lot of federal money will come back down because it will return to the states.
That hasn't been decided.
Good luck. Well, we got to have faith in our state. If you're having faith in the federal government, you certainly got to have faith in your state. The other part of that, and I lost my train of thought there, I don't know, the other part is, that President Trump is talking about creating, and I don't know if I necessarily like this, an academy, like the American Academy, I believe he calls it. So it will be a much trimmed down version of Department of Education, and what that looks like, I don't know.
Okay, I think this question, we've pretty much covered it on the Department of Education. It's just what is your thought on the federal department going away, which I feel like you answered. The next question they had is where's the leaking, or basically what is causing the state budget to have a shortfall? And it's not only for this year, but I believe in 2 years, it's actually only going to get worse if things don't start getting addressed. So do you have any insight in what's causing our shortfall?
I don't have a lot of insight, but basically it's a projected shortfall. And so they're projecting just less money coming into our economy based on how good our economy has been over the last year.
Okay. A lot of questions on education this morning, so hopefully I'll try to, I want to make sure everyone's question gets answered, but I'll ask this one again. Do you believe that Nebraska can afford to fund the state's education needs if we are not receiving federal money from the Department of Education? What services will be curtailed or eliminated?
Okay, so first of all, this isn't going to happen overnight. There are going to be lawsuits. They're going to be, it will be drugged through the courts. And the second part is, as this just happened, obviously the governor hasn't had a chance to speak out on this a whole lot, and even our Nebraska Department of Education hasn't put out a statement. But, so talking with ESUs the other day, and the ESUs basically take care of all the special services for their local schools, and they said, we'll continue to take care of our local schools, and the ESUs are funded by the state.
This next question, how do you feel about what Musk is doing?
So, everybody would love to see a budget, or would love to see government inefficiency cut. But when it comes to their program, they get sensitive. And so those, the Department of Government Efficiency, obviously we want every part of government to be efficient. And I got news for you. I served in the Army National Guard. There was some things that made me sick when I saw how inefficient we did things. And that was the military. And so it's just part of government. I do believe that Elon Musk is doing a great job, and just the other day they found, I don't know how many different stations where we're just printing money without an explanation of what it was for, or the fact that it wasn't part of what was supposed to be. It's not on paperwork anywhere. It's just being printed, and who knows how much and where that's going. So I do need, we need to check our government and see exactly what's going on and get some things straightened out.
And then the next question
You have
is,
proof of this? You have proof of what you just said to me.
Sir, this is federal stuff though that Dan's.
Obviously, I've only read it in the newspaper and seen it on the news. So I have the same proof that everyone has right now.
So in other words, nothing.
You could say that.
okay, next one is, when was the last time we had a convention of states? I know Senator Halloran, he worked on a lot of that. So are you aware of when the last time, and as far as I know, it's been quite some time.
So we have called for a convention of states on a few different occasions. We have actually never met as a convention of states. I don't believe that has ever happened.
And I can't remember, is there a bill, I think, was it Senator Hardin? I believe he may be, I don't think it was prioritized, but I do think there was a bill that was introduced about convention of states.
Senator Lippincott has called for a convention of states with basically one item right now, or he's got them separated, but the one item we're really talking about is term limits for U.S. senators and representatives.
Okay, this question's on LB 166, county treasurers to maintain confidentiality of certain person's residential address. I guess I'll ask you first, are you aware of what LB 166 does?
Say that again.
LB 166.
On page 5.
And then the question just asked,
okay.
who are the certain persons?
Okay, so this kind of comes down to judges and high officials, but then they added National Guardsmen, police, and sheriff's departments. So basically, when you go in, you can basically say to the county, if this bill passes, I don't want my address on any document that the civilians or citizens can see or get their hands on. There's been an upspike in attacks on officials, and an uptick on those people receiving mail that might have different substances in it, hate mail, and so we're just trying to add some protection. I gotta say, mostly it's county officials on up, judges and magistrates and such.
This next one is on LB 373, which passed this week, about the closing of county roads. What issues led to this bill, and what does the bill add to regulations?
So I imagine someone brought this to a senator in their district. I'm not sure how it came up, but there are a lot of county roads that are unimproved. And so there's no gravel laid down on them, and maybe one or two people use it, or it might just be the local farmers that actually have to get to a field. And so the thought was to close those to save maintenance time. The sticking point is if that road is closed for 10 years and eventually goes back to farm field, how do you determine whose property it is? And how do you kind of turn that over to the local people?
Yeah, I think if I remember right, that dealt with minimum maintenance roads.
Yes.
And, you know, if a cattleman had wanted to, he had 2 fields across the road, but he could just fence the 2 fields together, the road's not being used, I think it allows that to happen.
It does, and it still has to be a decision
County commissioners.
by the county, yes.
Yep. Next question is, we have a water quality problem, specifically nitrate levels. Can anything be done to address this problem, and where, you know, being in the legislature now, I know there's been bills, last year there was probably more bills than this year, but where do you stand on issues like that, and what is some ideas you have for solving that problem?
I do not have any ideas at this time, Lance. I know on my own personal property, the state came out and checked the nitrates for free because they sent us a kit for free, and we could check our own nitrates. And then when the nitrates were too high, they came in and put in an infiltration system or reverse osmosis system that gives us drinking water. On the state level, I don't know that there are any bills this year. If there are, I haven't seen them.
I don't think they got prioritized.
I do think that we've taken care of this on the outside, and by that I mean farmers and ranchers now are way more aware of the level they can put down. So this isn't like a brand new problem, it's more like a problem we've been dealing with for years. And now we're kind of seeing the results of maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so I think we're getting our nitrate levels down, and we're way more conscious about what we're putting into the ground now.
And being a farmer, I can attest to that unfortunately is more what was done several years, I mean, we're talking 20, 30 years ago with nitrogen, when we just didn't have the science, we didn't have the technology to be more efficient, where today with farming, you know, I think unfortunately farmers do get kind of the bullseye on, because we are fertilizing our crops, but we are more efficient with technology and those resources. And I do know there's also, it doesn't get mentioned a lot, but the people in town that fertilize their lawns. You know, when you fertilize your lawns in town and you get that big rain, where's all that water that runs off the lawn? It goes into the city sewer, you know, and then that runs out into, that's what causes issues too. So, but that has been a big issue. I know again, I don't think this year there's been many bills brought up about it, because the last couple of years there's been several bills to help with reverse osmosis and putting grant money towards that to help those people who are in those areas be able to address that.
And there are a few larger cities that have said the nitrate levels in city limits is worse than outside of city limits. And so we all want to have a nice lawn, but what we did 20 or 30 years ago is now into the well systems.
Next question is on winners take all. I believe Senator Lippincott prioritized that bill. And basically, where do you stand on it? And you know, in regard to electoral college, you know, what is your view on that? Obviously, it's prioritized, so it will move at least to general file. Can you give some insight on that?
Yes. So a lot of people like to use the word democracy. In fact, we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, which means we have an electoral system. In, I believe, 1992, the legislature thought it would be wise to divide the votes and give everybody their say. And I think it was overridden, and then Ben Nelson vetoed the override, if I remember. But 48 of our states have winner take all. And so I think we need to get on board with them, winner take all, or the rest of the states need to come to what we're doing. But as an electoral vote system, I really think that the winner take all is a good idea. Now they talk about this blue dot that's in Omaha. It's blue versus red. And so I started looking at this blue dot to see exactly what it was. Well, the blue dot is 53% Democrat and 47% Republican. So it's not really a blue dot, it's a purple dot. But I do think we need to get onto the same electoral system with the entire country.
But why?
Well, because right now it's not on an even level. We're not on the same playing level and playing field with the rest of the states.
We're the only
How is it not on a playing field? You got more
Well-
people living in Omaha and Lincoln than you do in the rest of the state.
Well, so, and that's only 53% of that dot. So if we looked at the whole state, obviously it would be all red. I think if the other districts were more Democrat than Republican, then the Democrats would be like, well, why are we a split electoral? We should be all electoral votes and winner take all, because it would be to our advantage.
They didn't do that. When we had a Democratic governor and legislature, they didn't do that. They didn't change it to winner take all. They're actually the ones who said they wanted to split it up.
Well, we had winner take all until '92, and that's when we split it. And now we're looking at going back. I believe the thought back in '92 was, hey, we'll do this, and the rest of the states will see that it's a great idea, and they'll catch on to it. But outside of Nebraska and Maine, no other state does it. They're all winner take all.
Okay, the next one is on the bill that you prioritized. You mentioned in your remarks the practice of hospitals disposing human remains due to the abortions, tossing such into garbage bags, and using regular garbage dumpsters. Do you have any data to support that statement?
And so when Senator Hansen introduced this bill, he was going off some national data, but several proponents came in and said, yeah, this is happening, and there have been some not underground, but some camera work that showed that these fetal remains were being dumped in dumpsters. The only opponent that came in was Planned Parenthood, and their position was, we don't agree with this. We think you're barking up a tree where it doesn't exist in Nebraska. And Senator Hansen then said, then why would it be a problem to institute this? So to me, it's just a matter of making sure we're respecting these unborn babies that are being aborted and their parts or baby parts are being tossed out in the trash, as well as the health code or meeting health codes and making sure we're not spreading diseases.
Okay, I don't think this one has anything, there's a bill related to it, but I'll ask this question. As it sits, the sexual age of consent is 16 unless the older party is in a position of authority over the younger party, example, supervisor at work, pastor, etc. And the Romeo and Juliet laws allow a 13-year-old to be intimate with an 18-year-old. Do you feel like these laws should be changed?
I definitely think 13-year-olds and 18-year-olds should not be together. I just think there's a level of maturity that's quite different there. I'm not aware of the Romeo and Juliet law, but I know we have some statutes that try to protect young people.
And going back, if there's ever, that is an issue, as far as I know, I don't think there's a bill addressing that in the legislature this year, but those are issues. If you have a strong feeling that something needs to be changed in legislation, that's why we have our elected officials, Senator Lonowski and whatnot, take it to his office, say this is a problem, and he can look into it, and he'll either see it as an issue and take it forward, or maybe there's other ways to deal with it. This question here, and I did look it up, this is LB 89, this would be Senator Cowth's Stand With Women Act, and it was introduced by Cowth on behalf of the governor. Why is the legislature considering LB 89 when it is so discriminating toward a small at-risk portion of the population?
I believe LB 89 will save schools and school districts from lawsuits. There's one Class A school that's not that far from here that allows, I'm trying to think, trans women, which is a young man dressed as a woman, allows them to use any bathroom or any facility. They're welcome to play in the sports, though that hasn't happened in Nebraska to my knowledge. But if I have a 7th grade or 8th grade daughter or granddaughter that walks into a bathroom, and there's now a 6-foot tall junior, because they're in the same school, 7 through 12, and he's dressed like a girl, I'm not saying anything's gonna happen. I'm saying now, though, that 7th or 8th grade person has got a whole different view about their safety when they go to the bathroom. And so we're looking at this very small minority that you mentioned having rights, even though it violates the rights of 99% plus of the majority who also have rights.
And I think, did she prioritize that one?
She did.
So that will become.
And there's 3 parts to this. One is keeping and by the way, she doesn't mention the word transgender in her bill anywhere. It simply says boys should use boys' locker rooms, boys should be in boys' sports, men who get sent to prison should be sent to men's prisons, not women's prisons. And that is an issue also. What she took out of the bill was public facilities for adults. So if you go in the Capitol, you could still use either bathroom if you wish, or if you go to a county government or whatever. So what we're really trying to do here is protect young ladies. The sports thing, it has happened, and there haven't been any track incidents yet or any other in Nebraska, but when you look at the track results of a young man that claims to be a woman and he wins the mile by 12 seconds or whatever they are, then you realize that there's a difference when we become adults.
Senator, could you talk a little bit about, I'm sure you probably paid attention to the legislature the last at least 4 years, and it does seem like the last 4 years, or at least 2 years, there was a lot of these hot topic social issues that really, 2 years ago, slowed the legislature down to almost a halt because of filibustering. And then this last, would have been in August, we had the special session again. Could you just talk about maybe the environment in the legislature, how things are working? Do you feel like things are moving through? What is the working environment like right now in the legislature?
No, I don't think like they're going smoothly. So the very first thing we do when we become legislators is we have a committee on bills, or excuse me, on rules. So they have the rules committee. One of the rules I brought was the speech has to remain germane, or another senator could say that's not germane. So that means to stay on topic. So let's say it's the LB 89 topic, the protect women topic, and somebody starts talking about small engines, and it's happening. That's what's happening. And then we spend 8 hours because a legislator or two doesn't want to get to a certain topic, or they want to avoid the vote. And some people, way smarter than I, or way better than I at chess, they've thought out a couple of days. And they say, in order to avoid what's on the itinerary for tomorrow or for the next day, I'm going to drag today into tomorrow with daylight savings time or with whatever topic they want. So I had a rule saying you must stay on topic, or 3 different senators can call you out, strike 3, you don't get to talk anymore on that topic. The fear was, well, 3 Republicans could just overpower a Democrat who wants to talk, and then he or she would be done talking. That's a good point, but The flip side of that is we can talk 8 hours on a topic and not get to resolution.
This question is, how much attention do you give the calls and emails from your district? You know, maybe talk about when you get those messages, calls, who maybe's looking at those, how do those get to your desk? And then, yeah, basically summarize that.
I can tell you I've changed my posture from the first week. Almost, well, I would say 90% of my emails and calls come from Omaha. I appreciate them when they're from my district, so I have an LA, a legislative assistant, and an AA, an administrative assistant. They have access to my emails, and I said, I want to see them all. I said, but I want you to separate them because Omaha is just like a whole file, and District 33 might be like 6 or 7 a day. And so I do weigh that heavily, and I read everyone from our district, and I try to respond to everyone from our district personally, as I tell Ron and Krista, hey, if it's from my district, I want to talk to them personally. And so I really do, I try to answer honestly. It might not be the answer people like, but I try to let them know how I've seen it or how our legislators see it.
No, and I appreciate that, and I hope everyone does realize at the end of the day, if you do got questions, there's cards coming here, that, you know, these are elected officials, and sometimes it can be a thankless job. They may not agree with where you stand on an issue, but it is their job to at least listen to you, take into account. And so we do appreciate Senator Lonowski stepping up to the plate, because we are finding nowadays it's harder and harder to find people to run for these offices. You know, especially when we talk about federal issues. You know, I think many of you probably saw, I just had a conference call with Congressman Flood yesterday, and came up about, you know, he had his town hall in Norfolk, and, you know, kudos to him. Whether people are happy with him or not, he's able to get in front of the crowd and be able to at least answer their questions and be direct with them. So we do appreciate Senator Lonowski doing these things. This one is on LB 647. Explain. I got it.
Yeah.
I can look it up. Is it on the sheet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
property
Jean?
tax.
Property tax, it says relating to the net book value. Who establishes the net book value?
The Appropriations Committee and Senator Clements. Senator Clements he's been a banker for 50 years in, I think, Elmwood, Nebraska. And he's just a genius and all that. And he's also the guy, well, the whole committee, Appropriations Committee, they're cutting. And when they said this year that we would have a deficit, I thought that meant don't write any bills that are going to require millions of dollars from the government. So I really tried to stick to that. But there are people that they're like, we want six more weeks for a gal that gets pregnant in prison, and it will cost like $12 million, you know, and things like that. So appropriations has to go through every one of these items and say, you know what, we are not going to give money to this. It might be a good idea. There's a bill that extends family leave for a teacher that gets pregnant right now, and she can get 6 more weeks. So I have gotten calls or emails from our district saying, we know of teachers that use up all their PTO time, they go on vacations, and then the female teacher gets sick. And the other part of this is they want teachers to throw in $20 a month each. Because these people, and they get sick, or excuse me, they get pregnant, and now they're going to have their baby in February or March, and they want 6 additional weeks off after their maternity leave. I get it. If you have problems with your baby or your issues, I understand it. But you also have PTO and all these other days for a reason. And teachers are kind of special situation because it's 9 months of the year anyway. And so it's got a $12 million earmark on it. So I'm like, it's a good idea. Maybe this isn't the year we do that. And so I don't know who establishes that value, but I believe it to be the appropriations committee, they're saying, hey, we're gonna go this far and we're gonna make sure that we can meet a balanced budget. And that's one thing I like about our state. We have a balanced budget, so we don't get ourselves in trouble like some states have, like the federal government has, where we're trillions of dollars in debt.
And Gene, I'll have to look up more about that one. I have the bill pulled up, but it is really complicated. So I'm assuming here, net book value as a percent, they're basically trying to, on how we value property, change that, because there's a table here, so I can even look into that for you, Gene.
Well, I know they used to use sales.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, what
Yeah.
sales are doing.
Yeah, because I think that's what, just reading it here, it's calculations using the 150% declining balance method, switching to a straight line. So, and then I'm sure many of you own property, so when it gets into how we do property here in the state, it is very complicated. And I don't know if that's also related to, Senator Anderson has LR 12CA, so that would, basically if that's passed, that'd come to a vote of the people. And that bill is basically, it actually mimics California in how we value property. So basically what you purchase when you buy a property, whether it's a farm, it's a house, commercial property, that is what that will be taxed off of going forward. So if property values would happen to go down, you're gonna pay that. Property values go up, you're gonna pay it. So I don't know if that's maybe even related to that one potentially, but Senator Anderson did prioritize that one. And I think with that, we are out of time.
Let me add one quick thing to that. So, Gene, way up in the southwest part of our state, and even in the northwest part of our state, and the north central, the LDS Church and Bill Gates have paid amounts of money that you or I wouldn't pay or couldn't pay, and so it affects the property values of all those around them. And so we're trying to get a handle or a grip on what is the actual value versus what those people have paid. So it raises your values even though you didn't purchase anything or change anything. So
Well, it's just like 2 years ago, this outfit from out of the state bought a bunch of ground locally, and they filed bankruptcy this year.
yeah, that doesn't help us either.
No.
No, well, with that, Senator Lonowski, thank you for coming out here, doing our coffee with the senator. Let's show our appreciation for it. And then we will have another coffee with the senator here again. Remind me of the date. It's in May, I know. I didn't look it up. It's right before the session ends, so I know.
Yeah, I believe it's May 3rd.
May 3rd. So we'll have this again May 3rd. Again, we appreciate you all coming out and asking questions. Again, if you have any concerns, comments, again, as the senator said, reach out to his office and his aides will make sure he gets that message. So thank you. Have a good weekend.